whether it's a family business or a large business, it's business. And you need to make sure that your customers are happy. You don't always have to agree with them either, but there's a way of diplomatically disagreeing as well. I think some of the best business leaders are the ones that have really strong emotional intelligence, understand their own people, but their customers as well, and understand that at the end of every interaction is a human being at the end of it, and we're all different, we're all unique.
So, introduce yourself so we can, before we get into the grimy bits.
Yes, my name's Scott Lee Holloway. I'm a certified customer experience professional and banker. I've been in the financial services industry pretty much all of my career. You can probably tell that I'm not Maltese. I'm originally British, but I've been living in Malta for nearly 8 years now, so quite a while. And yeah, what else would you like to know?
So, well, you do have the odd melas now coming out.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that since I last spoke to you.
Yeah, my family tell me that my accent has changed.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a mixture now of different places.
It does tend to rub off, the melas and the tas and the
exactly. Yeah.
bonjous and the... good to have you on the show, Scott.
Good
and
to
good
be
to see
here.
you as well.
Yes.
We met a few months ago for a tea or something, right? But we
Yes.
hadn't seen each other for years before that.
Yeah.
For those listening or watching, we worked together at HSBC a long time ago.
Yes.
Long time ago. 7 years, I think. 6, 7 years.
The beginning would have been more than 7 years ago.
That's
It's gone really fast.
It has. I remember you moving away, and I was like really happy for it.
It was bittersweet. I was really sad to leave you guys because it really was like a family.
Yeah.
But then I was really excited to take on the new role.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think you've really flourished in the next step, and that's why I really wanted to kind of just have you here and chat about it, because customer service is something I'm very passionate about as well, and
Yes.
we've worked together in customer service and in sales as well. So it'd be really good to see kind of your thoughts now that you've experienced it and you focus on it and it's your bread and butter every single day. You've also written a book, I believe.
Yes, I co-authored
yeah.
a book in the customer experience series. That was quite a surreal moment. In fact, this year's there's been a lot of moments I didn't expect, but I've been following that series since the beginning. And my main customer experience mentor was part of the first version of that series. It was Customer Experience 1, and I was part of Customer Experience 5. So it was the 5th in the series. It's still currently the latest one at the moment. And that was a really great experience. It's on Amazon if anyone wants to get it.
I'm just going to put the link so we can.
The ebook version is only a couple of euros, and you don't need a Kindle to read it. You can just open the app and read it from there, or you can get the old-fashioned paper copy if, like me, you prefer the actual book as well.
Who should read this? Like, who should go for this kind of literature?
What I like about this series as a reader is that it does bring a lot of different perspectives. I like books where it's one author and it's one kind of narrative, but this brings lots of different stories to the table and experiences. So there's something for everyone. I can't remember the exact number in the book that I'm in, but there's something like 15 to 18 different authors. So there's a lot of different perspectives. These are world-leading CX experts. Some of them have contributed to the series before, and some of them it's their first time. And it's really giving a perspective on different ways that you can look at your customer experience delivery as a business or as any type of organization. And for sure, if you read the book, you will definitely take away at least a handful of things that you can implement straight away, pretty much, that will help improve your business. So there's going to be different takeaways for different businesses, depending on how mature their customer experience management is and what type of business they are. But definitely they will take away something valuable. So I would recommend it to everyone. The whole series is really good.
That's awesome.
So I, as a fan of the series, it was a real honor to be asked to be part of it. And I had every single copy of every edition before I was even approached.
That's awesome.
So it was a really good moment.
So how'd you get that gig, right? Like, so how do you get approached?
I was connected to most of the people in the series, including the person who founded it and kind of curates the series and asks different authors. and was asked if I had anything that I would want to contribute, and I had to think about how I would like to put my article together. I still wasn't sure if I would be chosen to be in the book, so I was kind of cautiously optimistic, but I was always thinking, I don't know, the selection process, and they were really supportive, and we became like a really close-knit kind of group as well. The different authors, we have a group chat, we speak together. We're still going to do an official launch event for the book, even though it launched earlier in the year. We haven't done an official launch event. That will probably be held online. So again, to be alongside some of the CX professionals of this caliber, it was really a great experience, and I really, really enjoyed being part of it. And seeing the reaction to people that were reading it, that's been amazing. I've had people reach out from all different parts of the world. That's the great thing nowadays with how international launching a book is. It's really reached. I've had people reach out from all over the world. So that's been really, really nice.
That's awesome. I'm just writing it down here so we can put that in the description. So that's really cool. I mean, the fact that you had that opportunity and then you kind of like were chosen for it, it's just...
Yeah, it was really nice.
And that's like your mark on the world forever,
Yeah. I've got an Amazon author page now.
Exactly. When you rolled and I'm like, I wrote a book. Right? What did you do?
Yeah, it wasn't on my bingo card for this year, but I won't say no. It was a great opportunity.
And you did say that, you had a lot of unexpected wins this year, right? So what else happened then?
I mean, I don't tend to kind of set too many short-term goals. I always have an idea of where I want to head, but I do believe in being very much in the moment. But this year I had a promotion to Senior Customer Experience Manager. That was quite recent. I also replaced our CEO on the board of the Malta Bankers Association, representing our bank, APS Bank. So both of those were really big milestones for me. And just other smaller ones, but these were some of the big moments, and I've spoken at 4 different countries by the end of this year in terms of CX conferences: London, Macedonia, Vienna, and here in Malta at what's going to be the first local CX conference. So that's really great as well.
That's good.
Yes.
I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
That's
you
really
too.
Good. Really good. So, customer service, right? So why do you work in customer service? Like, why are you so passionate about it? And I would love to hear your side of the story, because we're both passionate about it, and I don't want I don't want you to share my bias before I see yours. So why do you think it's important?
Well, so I am a customer experience professional, so customer service is really important part of it.
Yeah.
But it's one component. There's more to customer experience than this, but it's a super important part of it. But it's important to look at the customer's end-to-end interactions at each of your touch points. The reason I think it's so important is that ultimately every business has a purpose. There's a reason it exists. And I think sometimes organizations can lose sight of that. And really, the stakeholders at the end of it, your customers, are really the most important visitor you have.
Yeah.
And therefore, it only makes sense to design everything you're doing around what their needs and expectations are. But to do that, you have to know what they are. So you have to try really, really hard to tune in to the voice of your customers. And I believe that doing that is a surefire way to have continued and sustainable business success. So ultimately, I'm a business person, and I want our business to be really, really successful and to have a sustainable competitive advantage. And I believe that customer experience is the best way to achieve that. Obviously, there are other things that businesses can do as well, but it's going to give you a long-term sustainable advantage that's really difficult to replicate. And of course, leave your customers really happy at the end of it. And ultimately, if you can have a successful, thriving business and happy customers, for me, that's a recipe for success.
You said tuning into the voice of the customer, right? So for our listeners that maybe don't have a large bank,
yes,
and the resources that come with it, right? So how would a small or a medium-sized enterprise approach to voice of the customer when resources are so limited? You're usually running on what you have. You're just running on fumes all the time, right? So how does a small company tune into the voice of the customer?
It's a really good question, and it's funny that you look at us as being large, because it's true compared to other companies. We are a larger organization, but in the grand scheme of international banks, we're quite small for a bank. So when I speak to peers across different industries, especially in different countries that work at very large banks, their banks have sometimes 30 million customers. So it's a bit different, and I sometimes look at them and think, wow, the resources they have, what I could do with this. So I think you always need to look at what works for your organization, it's not always about having the most people working on it. Sometimes it's about focusing your efforts in the most effective way where they're going to be felt. But all organizations usually have some type of insight or feedback coming from their customers. Sometimes they're just not listening to it or collecting it. So it's really a culture. You need to get everyone in your organization, however big or small it is, to realize how important that is, listening to your customers, and to find a way to channel it. If you're in a regulated market like ours, then you have certain obligations, for example, to handle complaints. So that's a good starting point. Go to your complaints register, see what customers are saying, see what's not working for them. If you are a much smaller business and you don't have, as you said, such a structured approach, sometimes there are benefits to being smaller as well. The smaller you are, the more agile you can be, the more nimble you can be. You could change something tomorrow. In a much larger organization, the bigger the organization, typically the more layers of authorization that are needed, the more levels of sometimes bureaucracy, red tape. So the great thing is you can, whatever needs changing, you can just change it. So I try to spin everything on its head and see the challenges as opportunities. And being smaller is one of the quickest ways to change things. You might not have all the resources you want, but is that what your customers are telling you? Is that what they need? Probably it's not. Sometimes it's just fine-tuning what you're doing. It's not always reinventing the wheel either. So it's just about being really close to your customers. A lot of the time people in board meetings or executive committees are not knowing what the customer needs or wants. So it's really important that there's someone in the organization that is feeding that insight into them, so they do have a really good feel for the customer. Because ultimately they want to take decisions in their best interest, but they can only do that if they know what that is and what that looks like.
Do you think a lot of small companies put the customer at heart?
I think that they do try. What I've seen is that my initial kind of presumption would have been that a smaller company, especially when you own the company, you would have more of a vested interest to make sure that you're getting the right outcomes for your customers, because that's your business success, that's your income. You're not only an employee that's earning a wage, you're obviously dependent on the success of that business. But what I've actually found is that sometimes, because you're so close to the company and it's your baby, people are really defensive to any constructive criticism. So actually, when customers are sometimes sharing feedback that's really useful to help them improve, they take it a bit in the wrong spirit, I would say. So it's a bit of both. I would say that they do really want to make their business as good as it can be, but sometimes are a bit too defensive to feedback. So we need to see that even if the customer's not happy, we need to put ourselves in their shoes, but understand objectively what they're actually telling us and what can be improved. Sometimes they might be being really difficult or making a bit of a fuss, but they have a really, really valid point that we need to improve something. So you have to strip back a bit the emotion and see objectively what is the feedback this person's telling us or these people are telling us. And there's always something that can be improved. So it's listening to it and thinking a bit outside the box as well. Not this is how we've always done it, so we're just going to continue in this way, whether it works or not. Is it working today? What are customers expecting? What are our competitors doing? All of these things we need to constantly look at. And I look at different markets, not only the financial sector. I get lots of inspiration from retail and different sectors that are doing, quite innovative things. Because ultimately, there's a consumer at the end of it that needs a service. So it's not worlds apart from different sectors, and you can get inspiration from all different places. So it's being open to change, really, and not being fixed on doing things the same way that you always have done, because maybe that's not the way that would best suit the business today or work for your customers ultimately.
You talked about being defensive to feedback, so two questions for those listening, and I would love to hear your points with this, right? So
sure.
How would you find out if you're being defensive to feedback? So if somebody that maybe doesn't have the understanding of what defensive to feedback means, right?
Yeah.
So how does one gain that self-awareness that they are being defensive to feedback? And secondly, how do you change that mindset?
It's a good question, and it's not easy. I think that you can always tell as a customer if a company really wants your feedback and whether it's actually valued or not. And I always say as well that companies that make it difficult for you to share feedback with them don't want your feedback either, because otherwise they would make it easy. So something we work really hard on is making it really easy for our customers to share their feedback with us, whatever it may be. I have an example from when I was really new to the island, because culturally in the UK everybody likes to complain and it's quite normal.
Yeah.
And it's not, although it's complaining, it's not always seen intrinsically as negative just because you're complaining. Sometimes people see it that they're helping that business improve. So they do see that, you know, if it was my business or if it was my company, I would want to know this feedback because then I can improve that, you know, what's not working. And instead of walking out of the door and not coming back, I'm giving them a chance to fix it. So people had this view a little bit. I remember I bought a lot of things I had just got a car, and I bought a whole load of car paraphernalia from a petrol station, but also a shop.
Yeah.
And they gave me a tax disc holder, and it was solid plastic. I'd never seen one quite like it, and it didn't stay on the dashboard. It kept falling off, and it was quite dangerous because it nearly flew out the window. So the next time I was going back for petrol, I bought another basket of groceries from the shop, but I told them, I need to return this. It's not working. And they told me, what do you mean it's not working? I said, no, it doesn't stay on the windscreen. They said, that's because your windscreen is curved. And I laughed because I didn't realize they were being serious. I said, most windscreens are curved. There's not many that are completely flat. And then they told me, no, those ones don't stick. You need to use sealant and fix it to the windscreen. And then I pointed out I wouldn't be able to change the tax disc. It would be permanently fixed to the glass. So all of this went back and forth. This tax disc holder was literally about €2 or €3. It was very inexpensive. And all I was expecting them to do was just to take the price off of the rest of my shopping that I was already buying. And I'd already spent quite a lot of money there because I bought everything I needed for my car. They went off in the back, started discussing it among themselves. And they took it really defensively and said, don't come here anymore. And like one of the owners shouted it from the back. The person on the front said, yes, we're going to deduct it from the shopping. And he shouted it like from the back office, but it wasn't that far away. And I've lived in the same town for 8 years now and haven't been back there since. And it's my closest petrol station. So I just think that it was very short-sighted and very unnecessary. And the fact that they know that product isn't working, a number of people have given them feedback, and they don't replace it with one that's suitable or fit for purpose. That's one thing. And then the way they reacted to what was a very reasonable, feedback to give them, and quite an unreasonable response to fix it to the car permanently with sealant. So that immediately told me, okay, things are a bit different. And I'm not as quick to complain here as I would be normally in the UK, because I do worry that it's going to be taken the wrong way, even though I genuinely want to help them improve. And so it took me a while to see it that way. But then from the receiving end as a business, I only saw it as valuable and gold dust. And in fact, I really appreciated that customers took the time to share their feedback. So I think businesses know how they're responding to that type of criticism or feedback and what they're doing with it. I think that if they really, do a bit of soul searching, they will know if they're being defensive or if they're actioning it well. If they do think they need to improve on that, it's really about sometimes stripping out the emotion from business. It is business. So if whether it's a family business or a large business, it's business. And you need to make sure that your customers are happy. You don't always have to agree with them either, but there's a way of diplomatically, disagreeing as well. So they need to find a way to be able to take criticism. Yes. It's not easy, mind you. Yeah. I mean, I don't agree with all of the feedback our customers share with us, but I'm always thankful that they shared it with us. Yeah. And usually as well, there's more than one point of a customer's feedback or a complaint, and I will always find some common ground on some of it, even if we can't agree on all of it. And then the parts that we don't agree, it's about getting them to understand why, and maybe there's something they don't know or they don't see. So but I never see it that we're working against the customer. Even if there's a problem, we're working with them to solve it. So I think that's an important mindset shift. It doesn't happen overnight, and you need everyone in the organization to be on the same page that customer feedback is really important, that it fuels our improvement processes. And that starts from the leadership, and they have to see the leadership really role model that behavior. If they don't, it's not going to trickle down into the rest of the teams.
I really like the concept of making it easy for customers to share feedback. And I think, just like, as a professional coach, which is what I'm doing, right? Like at the end of each session, what can I change? What can be different? And I think a lot of people locally, they're very surprised by that question. And they don't tend to give a lot of feedback because they're not used to looking what can be improved. And I think when I then have international clients, the feedback is usually very quick to be given. Not necessarily negative feedback, but even the positives, right? So people are very self-aware of what's happening. There's intentful thinking behind the feedback structure. So I think if we're looking at like a country like Malta, and there are other countries like it as well that have similar customer service mindsets, because we don't look for feedback, we don't improve. So you kind of stay in the same area, and the way change happens in smaller countries like Malta, it tends to be the change tends to be very very quick, and so it doesn't happen for a long time, and then all of a sudden there's a sudden change. Like, you know, if there's an influx of foreign migrants, for example, you know, migrant workers coming in,
and people will bring their different cultures,
and they bring their cultures, and the expectation all of a sudden went from being, you know, here to now suddenly going up quite high. A lot of businesses don't survive that change because they don't have the infrastructure in place to adapt to it, right? And there's many industries that still struggle to this day to adapt because they stay behind and they don't look for it. So the making it easy for customers to give feedback is probably step number one, I think, right? Like figuring out how to make those channels open.
I think that's really important. I always say when companies or anybody doesn't know where to start with your customer feedback, your voice of the customer, however developed it is. There's always something. You're never starting from a completely blank slate. You'll have something. And it's really important because I go to lots of different CX forums and conferences. And as you mentioned, if you don't listen to customers, you'll be disrupted. And that's happening across all sectors. In banking, there's the fintechs and the neobanks. So you're not only competing with the other traditional, core domestic banks. You have new entrants into the market that are doing things in a new way. And sometimes what these entrants have done is just listen to what today's consumer really wants from a banking service.
For sure.
And it's the same with other markets. I was part of discussions that were very heavy with retail CX professionals, and they were all talking about Shein and the way that these online, giant companies now that are international have completely taken huge chunks out of their market. But again, what these companies really did was find a way to reach the consumer and, deliver something that they obviously had a demand for. So if they were listening to them beforehand, they could have had a similar model or a closer model to what the customer was looking for already. What happened is they, came along and delivered something they wanted. So that's what it's really about. So I think that it's so important. And even if you're doing well today, customer expectations shift so rapidly that you have to keep your finger on that pulse and see, is it still what the customers want from us? It's not easy. It's a continual challenge, but you must try really, really hard to do it. And the businesses that exceed are the ones that make the most effort. It doesn't happen by accident. I haven't seen a company that was really lucky that didn't put any effort in and just somehow managed to get everything right. Because there's so many conflicting priorities that if you don't focus on customer experience, you just won't deliver it very well. So ultimately, it has to be a conscious and, as much as you can, a structured effort to what you're doing.
I think it's important, right? And it goes, like if you inverse that and you go into like a large corporation or whatever, and you're a senior or director in that company, you need to listen to your employees because, same with the same concept. So the trickling down or up of information is super important, but also then the execution on the back of what's happening, so then step one is get the channels of communication right. And then step two is, make sure you can execute on the back of it. Because if, you've got customers telling you this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem for years. And then the customers will leave you, and then you're flabbergasted, like, we have the feedback coming in, but we're not doing anything about it.
It's really true.
Yeah, and as you said, like a lot of successful companies, it's not a surprise that they made it because they've listened to their customers. And I think it's so true. Our very first guest, Ben Vincenti from Tableo and Bookia, said that anything, they literally build the product around the customer requests and the needs of their customers. So it's just the way things are, right? The way things work. So
I mean, it's a proven model time and time again, and we've got the big examples, but Steve Jobs famously said multiple times that they started with the customer experience and then designed backwards from there. There's no point introducing or developing a fancy new technology if there's not, an application or a use case for it. And there's a number of companies that it's very much the same. Amazon were founded with, I would say, an obsession on what the consumer needed at the end of it. And they were one of the first to utilize data quite intelligently to, fine tune what they're doing and to optimize, and even customer feedback, because not only did they use it to improve their model, but they also leveraged it to help other customers make their purchasing decisions. When you're not sure what to buy, sometimes there's so many choices on Amazon. The reviews help you, right? Now we're used to seeing that on most online stores, but they were one of the first one I remember that was doing it. So they were one of the pioneers there as well. So, and it doesn't have to be these giant, colossal companies. In a smaller organization, one of the benefits is you can be closer to your customer. So you should have a good feel for what they want. And if you don't think you do, make the effort to try and understand what they're looking for. I think it's easier when your organization is smaller because you do know your customer.
Yeah.
And you just need to see if there's anything else that you can do to improve their experience. And if you're not sure, ask them. That's something else as well. Don't be afraid to ask them, because sometimes companies are a bit shy or not sure whether customers would want them to ask them for their feedback. My experience is that customers are, for the most part, only too willing to share their feedback, and they also feel important when you're listening to them.
Oh, for sure.
So not everyone is the same. But customers that like to share their feedback do it because they want to help you improve. They care about your business, but also they feel important that you're listening to them and you care about their opinion. So, it makes them feel valued. So there's a value to that as well.
I think especially in the banking industry, obviously, because that's where you operate and I've operated for, 14 years. Yeah, many moons. You never go to your bank with good news, right?
No.
Or very rarely, like if you're looking for a loan or something like that. But you never go to the bank with good news. You normally go to the bank with a complaint or an issue. And, the last thing you want is for your concerns to be ignored or not worked on, right?
Exactly. That's why complaint handling is so important to customer experience for all businesses, I would say. But as you mentioned, in financial services, most consumers nowadays are self-serving for their daily transactional needs, and it's convenient, and that's what we want. We also know that the trends are that customers are visiting banks in person less often than they used to in the past, a generation ago. What this means is that their interactions are even more important, because if we don't get it right, that's going to be the lasting impression that's now left with that customer, potentially for the next 3 to 6 months, whereas in the past, maybe they would have been back, the following week. Most customers don't visit us that frequently now, so it means we have to really get it right when they do, and listen to them. So that's why it's so crucial to really, really understanding. And there's something else called the service recovery paradox, which is proven time again. It's not something new, that if you recover the service well, if something goes wrong, you can restore the customer relationship back to not only where it was before, but even stronger. Yeah. Because they know then that you're going to help them if there's something wrong, and that you're going to, put it right.
We were talking about it, I think with Stefan's episode, right? It's like, with episode 20 with John from Tableo as well, who's really really good supporter of the podcast, and also one of our sponsors. But and he was saying, like, stuff's gonna go wrong, right? Like nothing's gonna be ever perfect. But I think the way you react to a complaint really can really bounce you back, because you see a lot of, like, are you being served and stuff, right? So let's use a local example. Are you being served? A lot of people post a lot of negative stuff, but sometimes you'll be like, we had a problem, but this person really helped us out and took care of us and followed up, and they gave us something for free and all that. And that's like just free advertising, right? On a website where people love to hate on shitty organizations. I'm going to use a bad word, but it's just, as you said, it just makes sense, because people will be like, oh, okay, actually bad experience, but you dealt with it properly.
No, that's really important as well. I call it the feedback economy. Our reputation now is like a form of currency, and it's more than ever before. You mentioned Are You Being Served? There's 2 Are You Being Served groups locally that have about 25% of the entire Maltese population in them. I don't know any other market that has one group that would have so much of the captive audience, in one place. And as you said, we all see those cases that go viral, have thousands of reactions and comments, and often for all the wrong reasons. So imagine the damage to that business with something that if they handled it right the first time, they could have done it differently. That's something we really stress internally, is we want to handle it, the optimal way, so people don't need to escalate, so that we give them the support they require, in-house. They don't need to then put it onto social media or take it to the regulator. And for the most part, we're very, very successful at reducing that type of escalation. There'll always be the odd case, but we monitor it very, very closely. And it's because customers, if they come to us for help, we'll give it to them, and we'll, take their concerns seriously and give them the support that they need. They don't have to go elsewhere. I think a lot of the time customers do that for various businesses out of frustration because they don't feel heard or listened to. And with customer needs, you've got the emotional needs and the practical needs. The practical need is the product or service you're providing, but the emotional need is they're a human being at the end of it, and they want to feel valued and seen and heard. If they don't, then you can't really get to serving the practical need because they don't feel respected or appreciated. So it's important that people understand these things. I think some of the best business leaders are the ones that have really strong emotional intelligence, understand their own people, but their customers as well, and understand that that's the thing with customer experience. At the end of every interaction is a human being at the end of it, and we're all different, we're all, unique. And it's about understanding that and the intrinsics of servicing the public as well. It's not easy by any means.
Oh, no.
But if you do it well, it's really rewarding, and it is really, really important to your business. There's nothing more important, I would say, to any business.
Yeah, if your customer stops believing in you, then your business is dead, right?
Exactly.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. What is the number one, how's the word I'm going to use? The number one no-go, like what's the number one thing that if you spot in a customer experience, you'd be like, yeah, this is a killer?
It's hard to say number one no-go.
We ask the hard-hitting questions.
Yeah. Now you've put me on the spot. I have to think about it. Sometimes it's funny you say this because sometimes it's hard to remove my CX hat when I'm as a customer, and I try to unwind and just have a normal experience. But I am always looking at what they're doing to see if there's something that we can take away that's useful, and even if there's something they can improve. And sometimes I don't always share the feedback because I don't know how they're going to receive it. But other times they actually ask me for it. So I won't say who it was, but a local hotel that was a boutique hotel was still kind of finding their feet. They were relatively new, and they were doing a lot really well, I would say. But then certain things were letting them down that were really, really easy to avoid. So they were trying to go for a luxury segments of the market. They were quite expensive, and then they had kind of hand stapled scrappy paper signs stapled around different parts of the hotel. They were also quite bossy signs telling you what not to do everywhere, and that just little things like this that let the side down. But lots of these little things, that's just one example where they'd done so much of the hard part right, and then at least type up this sign, at least have it in a frame, or some type of brand alignment as well. There was none of this, so it was really not giving the image of a luxury establishment. Yet they had done so much really, really well, so it was just fine tuning these small things. But again, it's the way you respond to other customers, because I've seen customers complaining or raising feedback and the business handling it really poorly. And there's usually other customers seeing or hearing what's going on, and it doesn't fill you with much confidence. You're seeing the poor customer, not receiving the best response to their problem. And they don't always realize the impact it has on everyone else that's overhearing or seeing what's happening. Yep. It makes you think, oh God, so if I have a problem, I won't feel like I can raise it to them. And I don't think it will be taken seriously. So I would say there's not really kind of one cardinal sin. I mean, not listening to your customers is obviously the main one, but that can manifest in lots of different ways in different organizations. It's just really about making sure that you are responsive to your customers and listening to them and treating them as important. Another example I can give, and again, I don't blame the staff, because I really believe that there's a really strong connection between employee experience and customer experience. And the more I've understood this, the less I blame the employees, because I realize that they're a product of their employee experience, and that probably is not very good. If they're delivering a poor customer experience, it's almost always the case that it's very, very poor. But an example we can probably all relate to is when you go to the supermarket and they're restocking the shelves, and the staff make you feel like you're in their way.
Oh my God.
Or they have those giant metal crates that are taking up the whole aisle during some of the busiest peak shopping times. And I
on
always
a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. And again, I don't blame the staff. They're probably overworked and underpaid and under pressure, and I'm sure that they're stressed. But they're only thinking of the task. They're really task oriented about putting this product on the shelf, and they're not realizing the whole point of doing that is so you can take it off. And that's what's paying their wages at the end of the day. So it's subtle, kind of almost passive aggressions that make you feel that you're in their way, and you should never feel that you're intruding as the customer. You should feel like you're the most important visitor on the premises, even feeling like you're disturbing them, asking for something or asking for help or asking to find something. If you feel that you're disturbing them, there's something not quite right with the dynamic of the relationship. They're not giving you a welcoming environment, and that happens quite often. And I think in the past what was happening a lot is that if people didn't have a better alternative, they might have grumbled and complained, but if all service providers were not providing the best service, they had to pick one. And what's happening today, even in smaller markets like ours, you've got more choice than ever before, typically. So if you're not happy, you do have an alternative and you can go somewhere else. So I think this is why businesses are having to listen more and more and more. We, since long before my time with APS, have always cared about the customer. We were founded that way, to really have a strong social ethos and really care about our customer at the end of it. A lot of other businesses are now retrofitting that to their model because they realize how important it is. Maybe it wasn't always the case for them, if they're honest. It's an advantage that it was always a strong focus for us, but we then need to see what that means in today's world and how to meet the needs of different types of customers today. And you know, it's a heavy responsibility as well as a service provider. Our customers make or break our business, and all of our success is thanks to them, their support and trust. So you know, we don't take that for granted, and you know, we're very much mindful that as we grow, as we're successful, it's all thanks to their support and trust. So we have a duty to then take care of them in the right way.
And I think people need to realize that, right? It's such a... It's an observation I make as well, like at supermarkets and at other shops as well, right? The focus on the task is so big that you forget the whole reason why
you're doing it,
or why the business operates. Because I understand you might be overworking and underpaid, but you know, that's the job you've chosen to get into, right?
They've lost sight of that. I do workshops with colleagues, and it's really important that these are across the whole organization, so it's not just customer-facing teams, where I get them to stop, take a step back, reflect on what the work is that they're doing and why they're doing it and how it connects to the customer experience. And sometimes at this beginning, not everybody understands how their work does translate to the end customer experience. And we try to take them on a journey to understand this. And it's exactly for the reason you're saying, of not losing sight of why they're doing what they're doing, what the purpose of it is. So that's really important. And that's why it's important to apply common sense and to be seeing whether we're achieving what we're trying to do, or are we just blindly actioning tasks that maybe are not even achieving what we designed them for anymore. Because if it's not working and it's our own processes and whatnot, we can change them, we can optimize them.
And you take the empathy away as well, right? Like when you're task oriented, you have no empathy towards towards the customer and how they might be experiencing. Sorry, I moved. That must have been really bad for the sound. But how they are experiencing the actual journey from start to finish with your product or your service or whatever. And people need to, you know, I do workshops. I do workshops with a lot of the clients I work with the companies I work with, to make them remember. Listen, the client's the most. No one else is important until the client is important, and then you can start making a hierarchy of needs or importance within the structure of the business. Absolutely, but if the customer is not at the center of everything that you're doing, something is absolutely wrong here, right? There are some industries where maybe that's not the, you know, I think like if you make airplanes, like the safety of the airplane is well, actually it's still in the customer, really, you know. But I think like most 99% of companies, the customer is. But
the safety would still be part of their experience. If you don't feel safe as a passenger for any reason, you're not having a great experience. I mean, it all, at the end of the day, it all impacts your perception of that organization.
Good point.
What you said, though, reminded me of something really interesting, because I network with CX professionals across the world. And I was seeing a lot of consultants I know working with pharma, and I found it really interesting. That was the last industry I expected to be really, you know, investing heavily in CX. And some of my comrades explained to me why that was. In pharma, they get their exclusive license for the new medicine and drugs that they create and they invent, and it's a 50-year license. After 50 years, it's then open to all manufacturers to manufacture it, and that's why you get the white labeled and, you know, the non-branded versions of drugs. Most of those licenses on a lot of the wonder drugs are about to run out, and they haven't been inventing so many new wonder drugs the same pace they used to. So they have to differentiate in the market in a different way. And the customer experience is how they're trying to do that for many of these big pharma brands. And it's really interesting because in the past, they didn't, as you're saying, they didn't have to care because they were the only one you could go to get this. Now you can go to and get it from multiple places, often cheaper once it's opened up for the license as well. So there needs to be a reason why they're reaching for your product off the shelf. And that's the same for any company or service, whether it's an intrinsic product like this or a financial service or, similar. Why should they choose you and not the competitor? You should always know the answer to that.
It is essentially a cost save, right? Because you're rather, even like certain industries, they don't reduce their prices. So let's say the market's valued it, so people start reducing their prices, and they're like, we're going to take a boutique approach, and we're going to be more luxurious, or we're going to be more professional, or so let's up our customer service, which probably is a bit front heavy in terms of investment, but then you don't really need a lot to sustain it, because once you've trained your people will do the job for you, right? That's
really true as well, that essentially, I mean, as you said, it's an investment. You have to invest in your own people and your customers, but definitely that's the way that you need to be looking at it. And it's long-term with customer experience. It's not short-term gain. It's very much long-term gain, but it's sustainable differentiation. The carpet can't be pulled from under you. I always think if you have to compete on pricing, you're probably not the best, because if the only way you can get people to come to you is by undercutting on price, then you're obviously not known for, as you said, excellent quality of service or superior customer experience. Often companies that are the most expensive get good reputation because they're the best at what they do. And that's still great value, because what they're providing is a superior experience than the competition. It's not like for like. And that's something else. It's proven in multiple studies that consumers are willing to pay a premium across pretty much all sectors for a superior experience, because they're not getting the same thing. And people's time and the ease of being able to interact with you is worth more than ever before, I would say, today, than it was in the past. People want to be able to go about their lives. They want better work-life balances, so they don't want to spend all their time interacting with their service providers. So they're willing to pay a premium for that if it's done well. So that's really, really important as well. And in that way, if you're winning on superior experience, that can't be pulled from under you overnight, whereas pricing can. If you're the cheapest and everyone's coming to you because you're cheap, and suddenly overnight a competitor undercuts your pricing, you're no longer the cheapest, and people will no longer be coming to you because you're the cheapest option. And Ryanair is a really interesting case study for this. Of course, they're a hugely successful company, an airline. They became the largest international carrier in the world. There were some very, very large domestic ones in the States and other parts of the world, but international carriers, they were the biggest. And other airlines couldn't just sit back and watch their market share be decimated. So they all lowered their prices, or a lot of them started to do this and to try and re-evaluate their model to be more of a low-cost or budget, airline. And Ryanair then started to really have a slowdown and actually a loss in some parts of their market share, because if people had an option of going with them or going with any other airline at a similar price, usually with Ryanair's reputation and the experience that they were delivering, people chose anyone other than Ryanair. And actually what they did was introduce a CX and the Voice of the Customer program, and their CEO is quoted as saying, if I knew that listening to customers made money, I would have done this years ago. But in the past, they openly said, we're not promising we'll give you the best experience, the best service, we're not saying we'll look after you really well, we're the cheapest from A to B. But it was then hard when their margins were squeezed and they were under pressure from competition to realize that that's not a sustainable way to be the only way to drive business. Value is important. It's not that people will pay endless, premiums for a different service or experience. But if it's delivered in a superior way to the competition, they are willing to pay a premium. And there's even studies that show how much of a premium by different sectors. It's not the same for every type of service. But typically, if it's a considered purchase, people are willing to pay even more because it's something that's going to be, more of a long-term relationship with that provider.
And now they make fun of their customer service on social media, and it's kind of like it's really got them this jokey reputation, but they like to bring up actual customer complaints and make fun of it, which is a really niche way of dealing with customer complaints.
It's tongue-in-cheek, and it works for them and their brand. No, I think businesses should take what they do really seriously, but we should never take ourselves too seriously. I think that's really important. We have to be able to laugh. And in the world of feedback and complaints, you see everything that's weird and wonderful, and sometimes you do have to laugh. It doesn't mean you're laughing at the customer, of course, because they might see it really seriously, however crazy the situation seems. But at the end of the day, you know, you have to be able to see the light in that moment. I think in business, sometimes we take everything too seriously, and our business is incredibly serious. I mean, that we'll never not take seriously, but we never need to take ourselves too seriously while we're doing it.
Yeah, I think so true, man. Like for me, the biggest challenge when I work with people is when I give feedback or direction, and then people are just way too serious about who they are, and their ego gets in the way, and there's a lot of like rigidity in adapting or transforming to something because of that. Oh, you know, this is a serious. And I remember, I think you remember him as well. We had a director with the bank that used to say, like, we're not doctors, no one's going to die, just relax.
Yeah, I do. And it's really true. And I think I try to break things down into that method of some things you can influence, things you can't, and things that you just shouldn't care about. And so much of the time we're worrying on things that we shouldn't care about or that we can't change. Yeah. So, you know, why are we, you know, spending time worrying about them? Let's focus on what we can influence and what we can change. And it's really true. And channel it into something constructive towards improving it or fixing it. Don't just, you know, stress out and worry. I think as well as ego, and ego definitely plays a part in it, but having worked quite closely with senior leaders, everything can look a bit rosy from the outside, and you look up to them and they're in a position of authority and responsibility, but I think there's quite a heavy burden of responsibility on them as well, and that can weigh really heavy when the decision is with you.
Oh yeah.
And those decisions can make or break a business. So you know, a typical day in the office, and it could be that they're taking a key decision which the future of their organization rests on. So I do get that that's really heavy for them, and I think sometimes we also do need to just remember that our leaders are human as well. They're still people. They might be really you know, inspirational people, they might be really talented people, but they're still people at the end of the day. I always reflect on this, how our CEO and our leaders, you know, have to take these really, really key decisions on a daily basis. Yeah. And thanks to their great decision making, you know, the rest of us are able to support on the parts we take care of, but it's all under the direction and vision of the leadership team. And when that's done well, it's something really to behold and, you know, to be inspired by. But it must be a heavy burden and not easy to, you know, carry. I think it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's like, you know, I think it's a whole ship, right? It's not just
exactly
the direction is there, but as you said, like everyone needs to kind of do their part to get them from A to B in terms of what success would look like at the end of the day. So no, that's a good point.
That's all very important. You reminded me of a video. It's on YouTube. It's from a book.
Let's find it.
I forgot the captain's name, but he's a captain of a naval boat in the States, and had a very different approach to leadership. He noticed that when he took over the role, everybody was looking to him for direction and for what should we do, and asking him the questions. What do we do about this? Or this has happened, what do we do? And then he started saying to them, what do you think we should do? And turned it round onto them. And he, instead of just feeding them the answers or the direction that he thinks they should go in, he said, you're the experts on this area and this area, you know this better than even I do. And he then had a team of people that were thinking, instead of just passing problems up the ladder, they were being, you know, actually cognizant in how should we approach this. And then they came to him with fully formed, you know, strategies on what should be done. And he just said, yep, that sounds right. You know what you're doing. And he said, a lot of people said, but what's the point of you being a leader? Or, you know, what's your place then if you're leading everyone? He said, no, but my point is that everyone is functioning effectively. All the cogs in the machine are turning. And they had an inspection and got the highest marks they'd ever had from this new approach that he was taking. And it was, especially in the military world, I think it was quite a different approach because it's very rank-based and positional authority.
Top down,
Exactly. So it was a very refreshing approach for them. And
even as a leader, right? So you know, you're in a leadership position, and I've been around the block a few times. With that stuff, and I think it's very tiring if you need to be the expert in everything. Especially like the bigger the company gets, you're gonna get burnt out and go mental. So that approach is the only approach that works in my opinion. I think if you have a big this is an opinion, you know, take it as you may, but trying to, you know, if you have a team of 3 people, you can be the expert and you can tell them, you know, do this, do that, and then micromanage your way to success. But as soon as your ship is like 15 people, like you can't, right? You need to rely on their expertise, and people need to come to you with problems, yes, but also with potential solutions, with options to how to solve it. And I think, and if that's not happening, then I think it's really time to stop and strategize and figure out, what am I doing? What do I need to do differently, right? So it's so uncommon to see people lead that way. I mean, you see it in international organizations where people have access to that level of training and knowledge, but rarely do you see that in maybe smaller companies, and not just locally. I think internationally there's the same issue as well, where there's a lot of attempt to micromanage, and you're just doing a lot of things badly instead of doing one thing really well. And I think, again, it goes down to hiring the right people, listening to the customer, and making sure that those people are thinking the same way that you do, and then you kind of just let them do the job and figure it out. So there's definitely a lot of...
I want to flip it on its head. We talked a lot about kind of, the customer coming to us, complaining, or, they have kind of suggestions or whatever. But what about changes being done in the company and how those are being then, communicated with the customer, and how to do that effectively? Right?
You made a couple of really good points. So when there's any change, even when it's for the better and it's positive change, there needs to be effective change management. So we have a change management team that take care of this. But that's really important, to bring your colleagues along on the journey with you. Even with our customer experience efforts, our CX efforts, I spend as much time working with our internal customers, our colleagues, as we do with our external. And it's really about bringing them along on the journey. Ultimately, our people deliver our experience. So if they're not on board, we're not really going to get very far with anything that we're doing. So that's really, really important. And then when it comes to change, as much as you can, you should close the loop with your customers, including internally. So if you've used their feedback to improve something, you need to let them know. And I've seen too many times that a lot of companies have done some really great work improving things, and they haven't let their customers know that either they've improved it or that it came directly from their feedback. So you told us you wanted to see this and we've delivered it. So that's a great story to tell. And as you said, sometimes we get caught up in the problems or the negative side of things. So if there's something positive to tell, tell that story. So that's really important. There's lots and lots of ways of doing it, and it doesn't have to be big things. We have feedback terminals in our branches where customers can leave their feedback of how their experience was. And we also display the results on the in-branch screens. Every single month we update it, so they can see how happy all of our customers were that, shared their feedback with us. And it's thousands of customers, so it's not a small sample. Because we're very proud of the results, but also confident that we are putting our customers first. So we're happy to put it up on the wall, whereas other businesses probably wouldn't be as confident to share their results,
But it's because you've placed the infrastructure to do it as well, right?
It's a team effort with our customers, because we can put them in place, but it only works if they're using them. And I think that all of that comes down to customer relationship as well, because when you do have strong bonds with your customers, they want to help and support and share feedback with you. They may be a bit more kind of indifferent if they don't care about the success of the organization. I saw this when we launched our IPO. I was speaking to lots of customers. It was a really great time. It was extremely successful. And a lot of our customers that I spoke to just wanted to be part of it, to be part of our success story.
Oh, you went IPO? I didn't realize that.
Yes, and it wasn't always about a return. They did believe that they would get a longer term return perhaps, but it wasn't about this. For the ones I spoke to at the time, it was really about being part of our journey, part of our success story.
That's cool.
That was the primary driver for a number of people I spoke to that just wanted to be part of it. Some of them investing, smaller amounts. It wasn't always large amounts, but they wanted to be part of our continued journey, our success story. And that, again, is because we have really strong bonds with a lot of our customers that I think not all companies have that to that degree.
And putting feedback up on the walls for all the customers to see, I think, kind of provides that feedback loop of others have done it, so you can also do that. Right?
It's encouraging them. No, that's a good idea.
Yeah, no, they can see that it's listened to, that it's important. And again, they'll see the changes done. I think you said earlier what's some of the no-nos. There's no point collecting feedback and then doing nothing with it either. So if customers keep sharing the same feedback that they're having a problem with the same thing, you need to do something about it. Otherwise they'll get tired and say, oh, I've already told you what I think, and you haven't done anything with it, so why should I take my time? Because everyone's really busy. So when customers do take their time to share their feedback, I never take that for granted, that they've taken the time out to do that. And that's why we have an attitude of gratitude towards their feedback or their complaint.
Attitude of gratitude. Did you rhyme that on purpose?
It's not a phrase that I coined. I've heard it elsewhere. I don't know who was the author. But yes, but it comes back to the same thing, though, of the customer being the most important visitor you have. There's nobody more important in your organization. So I think that it's the same thing, and it's showing them that you don't just say the right things, you do the right things, because I think so many companies say all the right things, and then you see the feedback of their customers, maybe on Are You Being Served, on Rubs, or wherever it is, and it's not matching what they're saying they're doing. So there's a big disconnect. And there's also a study in the States of over 2,000 medium and large companies that they asked the CEOs, are they delivering great customer experiences? And 80% said, yes, we are. We're very confident in this. And they asked their customers, and only 8% said yes.
Yeah.
There was a huge disparity. So that shows you how disconnected some of those leadership teams were in these large organizations from their customers. That's a really dangerous place to be, because you don't then know whether you're taking the right decisions.
The first thing I gauge whenever I onboard a new client is I ask the leadership, like, how do your people feel? How do your customers feel? How's your structure? Do you have KPIs? How's your performance management? Do you coach? Do you train? And then I ask the same questions to the employees, and it's completely different.
Yeah.
And it's sometimes it's because they're disconnected, and sometimes because they don't want to believe otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people start their businesses based on self-belief and thinking that they are doing or just thinking that they can do it, and they achieve it, and that's great. But then, like, you can't use that attitude of, like, if I believe it, it's actually happening.
Yeah.
Before setting it up. So it's important to set up the infrastructure, train your people properly, give them the right support, actually listen to your customers, and focus on it.
Yeah.
Nothing else is important.
It could be that it was working in the beginning, but
Yeah.
When you scale, like, so the way you make your first 500,000 revenue turnover is not the same. It will change when you get to like 1 million or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 100. And if you don't adapt, like, you're just gonna die, and and it's gonna be a very slow and painful death for you.
I forgot his name, but there's a quote from a CFO again in America that says one of the biggest problems or biggest challenges of being a bigger bank is not being a bigger bank or a larger bank. And I know what he means by that, trying to retain what people like about you when you're a slightly smaller provider. And the essence of that as you scale, not losing that personalized approach or human touch. So that's something that I'm very mindful of. Is making sure that we don't ever lose touch with our customers, and in an increasingly digital world, it's even harder. But it's something that if you make a focused and conscious effort, you can do it. But as you're saying, it's really important. And you also said that it's about supporting colleagues as well on delivering that. That's really important. I've seen so many times where they say, why are our people not doing this the way we want? Or why are they not getting it on this? If it's individual people, maybe there are some individual coaching needs. If it's across the board, then it's systematic and it's something within the culture of your organization, or perhaps they're not, being supported enough. It can't be that all those people you found are just terrible. There's something more than this. So
but even if you did, it's your responsibility.
Yeah, and as you said before, you have to start by hiring the right people. I do believe that it starts with finding the right people. I've seen people, for example, that are in customer-facing roles that I just don't feel like thrive in that environment. But they might be brilliant at a back office role. They might be really, really switched on at certain things. But I don't think they enjoy that customer interaction, and it comes across in their interactions.
No, I agree.
And I think that with people like this, it's difficult. You can try and help and support and coach them, but ultimately they're not in the environment that they would best thrive in, and that's not really fair on them or the organization or the customers that are being serviced by them. But they have to be a bit self-aware to realize that themselves as well, that it's not a good fit for them. And sometimes people don't want to admit something's not working, or they'll find other reasons why it's not working, instead of just saying, maybe this isn't for me, maybe I should try something else. And find what they would be better at and where they would fit better. I think that's important too. But then once you have the the right people, you have to support and coach them. And it's continual on a daily basis. And I think that's the whole role of management and leadership, is to support their teams ultimately.
That's it. You need to serve the people that serve the customer, right?
Exactly.
And it's very surprising how some businesses get it really right, and they do it without the predisposed knowledge. They just do it because they feel it's the intuitive thing to do.
Yeah.
But a lot of businesses get it wrong because ego gets in the way, hierarchy gets in the way, preliminary task focus gets in the way, and it's a shame. Sometimes it's a really good product or a really good service that's built on very solid values that just goes to the drain because of people, right?
I've seen in different organizations, sometimes it doesn't trickle down enough, so there'll be a really good understanding and buy-in at management level, and it doesn't always filter to all of the teams, and it's really important that it does. It's not easy to do that, but you need to think about, if I'm the person in one of our branches, in one of our stores, whichever sector you're in, do they get why we're doing this, why it's important? If you can't say yes, then you need to do something about that, because how are they going to portray it to your customers and your other stakeholders if they don't get it? It has to start at home.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, it depends as well, like on the founder. Like if the founder, for example, maybe is more on the technical side, you know, and not everyone is. I think not everyone is good at dealing with customers. I have that opinion. Yeah. And kind of if the founder is, you know, technically based, like has a technical background, but not so much customer facing, maybe they need someone else to basically kind of, you know, take care of that for them, right? Yeah.
No, that's really important. No, definitely not everyone is suited to a customer service role or a customer facing role. And I think sometimes there's that misconception that it is easy, or that, for example, for a contact center agent, that you could just put a headset on almost anybody and, you know, they'd be able to talk to someone. But it's a skill the same as anything else. And again, it goes back to what I mentioned before on the practical and the emotional needs. Even if someone is technically competent, if they don't have those soft skills at all, they don't know how to handle a customer, they're still not going to, you know, deliver the right service. So definitely it's not for everyone. And people need to be passionate about it, and it's not easy either, so that's why you have to really love what you do, because there'll be days that it's really, really tough, but it's rewarding to turn that around. But you have to enjoy that, and you have to want to interact with them. We are all customers as well, and we know what it's like when you're dealing with any company and you just don't feel like the person opposite you wants to be there with you. They're waiting for the end of their shift, they want to be anywhere else, and however polite they try to be, you can just feel that they don't want to be there with you, and you don't feel very valued as a customer, and it's not the best service, and it's potentially because they're not in the right role. Because when you do enjoy interacting with customers, that part of it's really rewarding.
There are two things that I hate the most. It's when the person just has no enthusiasm, and the second one, which is the worst, and it makes me want to crawl over the desk and beat them to a pulp, is when they're talking to their friend or on the phone and they're just completely ignoring you, and you're just there waiting with your shopping. It's just, dude.
It's so rude.
Do your job.
Or even, we mentioned the supermarket example earlier, where you haven't even had a chance to pack your bags and they're scanning the next person's items and sort of throwing them at you, and you're mixing up what's yours. And it's kind of like, it's like crazy. Passively aggressively trying to get you to pass along, but you can't pack as fast as they can scan.
And going back to like what you were saying about it's not for everyone. You know, you've done telephone facing retail service, which, you know, I did as well. I worked in catering for 7 years before I worked with the bank.
Exactly.
And it is absolutely a skill. It is absolutely a personality type as well. You need to be patient. You need to be able to like just shrug off certain things as well. You build up quite a hard skin. And also, like, you need to have a level of empathy as well to actually care, right?
Yeah, like, definitely.
You know, you're somebody that has this energy, and I'm pretty energetic and hyper as well. Definitely. Like, if somebody who's very monotone and boring, especially over the phone, that cannot like do any form of physical tells, will still struggle, regardless of how much they want to do the job. They're still going to struggle, and I think. Maybe just kind of a note to those listening, if they might ever want to set up a customer serving function, is that look for people with high energy, with really good attitudes, like, because otherwise don't just look for someone who knows their stuff, because learning technical knowledge is very easy, but learning like social knowledge is something that usually comes naturally or through a lot of experience within that
Exactly.
sector. And I think like people need to know what they're looking out for.
Yeah, I completely agree on that, to hire based just as much, if not more, on attitude rather than aptitude.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can teach skill, but you can't teach will. And if they're in the wrong environment, it's not going to be something you can
No.
overcome. But if they just need to be upskilled on certain competencies, that's something you very easily can
For
help
sure.
them with. So I think that's very, very true, as you said. And that's why hiring is really important. I've done it before. I have a small team, but sometimes I've been really, really, eager to fill the position, but I just don't have the right candidate. And it's tough because you really want to fill that role. You're really busy. You need the
Yeah.
help. But I wait and I issue the call again, sometimes for months, until the right person comes along.
Oh, yeah.
Because I know that dealing with complaints and feedback is not for everybody. And I need the right candidate, the right profile to do it. And then I can help them as much as I possibly can. But they have to be the right profile to want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's not for everyone, that's
Oh,
for sure.
For sure. Like when it comes to hiring, there needs like I'm a big stickler when it comes to hiring. Like either I get someone who's good for the job or I don't get it.
Yeah, or you'd leave it vacant.
I'd rather leave a job
That's
vacant.
the best thing to do.
Yeah.
If you settle and you go against your own instincts, it will end up not working out in the long run.
No.
I've seen this in other
Oh,
places.
yeah.
So definitely trust your intuition and your instincts and find the right fit for those roles, even if it's not easy to find, which is often the case.
No, for sure. I remember when I had my first like academy manager role, I had to hire like 8 coaches, and I remember interviewing 17 people over like 2 days. It was brutal. But I really wanted to make sure
Yeah.
that, I had the right people, and I was really lucky because we're still,
Yeah.
got good people. But there was a very intricate interview process.
Yeah.
It was very long, very long, and very
Yeah.
very detailed, and there were specific criteria that the person needed to meet, because they're taking care of 50, 60
Exactly.
people over the span of a year.
Yeah.
And I cannot have somebody incompetent in that role, right?
No.
So absolutely, I would rather leave a place vacant than fill
And
it
that's
up
the right
just to
thing
set
to
it.
do, in my opinion.
Yeah,
It
sure.
will cause more long-term problems if you bring somebody on board that's not the right fit, and then you'll still end up having to replace them when it doesn't work out. So you
sure.
would have been better waiting a bit longer and finding the right person. It's not easy though, because obviously you desperately want to fill that void of somebody missing, but it's definitely the right thing to do is wait for the right person. And they always have a way of coming around eventually. Sometimes you just have to be patient.
No, yeah, for sure. Cool. We're in the last leg of the conversation,
Yes.
but it's been really interesting. I think like we went into so much detail today. We talked so much like about the importance of the customer and all that, and I think it's come full circle on customer, people, leadership, structure,
Yeah.
systems in place as well. Because I think like with the use of technology these days, it's very easy. It's very simple to set up something, and there's a lot of third-party software that people
Yeah.
use, Zendesk and all that stuff
Exactly.
to really do to really bring the customer service or the CX journey. I keep using service instead of experience. Sorry, the CX or the customer experience journey to life, right? So, no, that's it's been a really insightful conversation. And we agree on a lot of things, so we didn't have
Yeah.
much disagreements here.
No, we think very alike on this.
well.
You've always really believed in placing the customer first. For me, I see it that it's the only way, and I don't
Yeah,
understand
I
why
agree.
anyone sees it differently. But I know that not everybody does see it the same way. But for me, it's so clear that that's the only way to run a business that it's just a no-brainer.
Because I think we've seen it work, right? We've seen it work on large and smaller
Exactly.
scales, and I think if you, even if you look at your employees as your customers when you are in leadership or a director position, that same approach also works, right? So
Yeah.
it brings these levels of
Yes.
behavior that can be repeated and can be replicated and can be used in different industries, and it still works. So, for sure, absolutely.
I think as well, kind of if you have a big market share, that maybe kind of that they're gonna come anyway. That like it's too big of a share that maybe you don't care anymore about.
You don't try hard enough.
Yeah.
It's true that sometimes, because there's a lot of inertia sometimes with customers, that they won't always switch even if they're not completely happy, just because it's the easiest thing is to just stay where you are. So it's true that the largest players sometimes, especially if they're practically a monopoly, they have an advantage that inertia dictates most of that existing business might just stay with them. But you can never be too complacent, because customers, if they get fed up enough, they will jump ship and they will move. And you can also never be too big to fail. We've seen giant companies that became obsolete and
because they didn't adapt.
They didn't adapt. I mean, even Blockbuster had the opportunity to buy Netflix, and Amazon went to the largest bookseller in the States because they started with just books and offered to partner with them, and they laughed them out of the boardroom. So they didn't adapt, but at the time you could never have seen those companies, failing, because they were such an integral part of people's lives. But people's requirements and expectations changed, and they didn't move with that. So I think that's really, really important. And I think now more than ever, people are fed up. You mentioned that there's lots of different people with different cultures and experiences that's helping to change perception. Even people that have gone and studied abroad or lived abroad and come back, the same as you're saying, they experienced maybe different service levels and then expect that to be replicated. So what maybe worked in the past isn't going to necessarily be working in the future. So it's really, really important that they do listen.
And a lot of people, like, customer service has become such an integral part in most industries. A lot of people have experienced what good customer service should look like internally as well.
Exactly.
Like for me, I have a one strike policy. Like, if I notice that somebody's customer, like the service just was not up to scratch, and I know that there's another option, they're dropped, right? That's it. I'm going to go to someone else. And I think, because that's my little vote.
Yeah.
That's it, I'm done, right?
That's what they taught me at school. I still remember it from my citizenship class. They told me that every time you give your money to a company, it's a vote, and don't keep complaining about how they operate if you're still supporting them, still voting them. Yeah. It's the same as if you were voting for a party and you didn't believe in what they were doing, but you kept voting for them. They'll change when you take the vote away, or you take your euro away and spend it with someone else. And that really is when most companies will take note as well. So definitely, I agree with you on this. The CX Academy says that you have to have something like 11 positive experiences to balance out one negative experience. So it's not like you can just have one really good experience and it cancels out the really terrible one you had last week.
What's the ratio of that?
They say 11 positive experiences to one negative.
Okay.
So it's quite a number that you have to have of positive experiences before you kind of forgive that negative one. Again, it depends on a number of factors, including if it was put right for you, if it was fixed. I've noticed that the vast majority of people are really, really good. I always believe this, and that people, if you're trying to help them and you're genuine in your approach, will be forgiving of, as you said earlier, things going wrong. It's then not making sure that it doesn't keep going wrong, the same things, because then they'll say, okay, I'm a bit fed up now because this has happened before. and that you're sincere in the way you approach it and try to rectify it. That's really important. I mean, customers are very intelligent and know when you're really caring about their problem and when you're not. And if they know you're caring about their problem, they'll be work with you to try and resolve it. If they don't feel like you do care about them, then, it's a different story altogether. But a company's never too large to fail or to be disrupted. So I do agree with you that sometimes they're complacent, but that's a definite mistake.
That's it, right? I mean, if it happens once, fine, but then if it happens twice, it's a systemical problem. There's a systemic
I never
issue.
forget. I was at a event where there was a speaker. It was quite an intimate setting in London. It was Sir Philip Green, who runs the Arcadia retail empire. And again, you could never see them failing before because they were so dominant. They own Topshop and all of these different brands, Accessorize and Miss Selfridge. And on the day he came, he was really, really frustrated with ASOS stealing a lot of their staff, but also their customers. And it came out constantly throughout his presentation. This was well over 10 years ago. I was a teenager. It was nearly 20 years ago, most likely. Right. But again, so that was the time when internet kind of clothes shopping was really taking off in the way it was. And before that happened, you never would have seen that such a Goliath could, have such a threat on their tail. And he mentioned it constantly throughout this presentation. And it was the same thing that they probably thought they were so large that they wouldn't be disrupted in that way, and it was wrong. They had a huge challenge on their hands to keep up with the online retailers, and in particular ASOS was a bugbear for them at the time. And again, it's moving with customer needs. I mean, obviously they're still going and they're still doing quite well, but they're definitely losing a lot of their market share to those new entrants.
Yeah, because they need to you need to adapt or die, right? It's just this is how it is.
Exactly.
it's been really good talking about it. We'll have to we're gonna have to come to a close because otherwise we're overrun and it'll become a bit too boring. But before we close it off, we have a sponsor gift.
Okay.
From Bookia, who's one of our sponsors.
Very nice.
I'm gonna cover the QR code so people don't scan it from the video. But that's
Thank
from Bookia,
you.
so you get 50
Wonderful.
euros off of the next meal you book through them. So,
Okay, great. Thank you, Bookia.
Enjoy it, yeah. Through
Yes.
Book, yeah. Thank you, Bookia, for sponsoring us and supporting us. Really, really good guys. Like, love working with them. Very customer focused.
Yes.
Very on topic for today.
It's a local company, right?
They started locally, but they're now international.
Okay.
So Jonathan France and Ben Vincenti, who are both on this show, started the Bookia Tableon. Was it Get Hitched? I think. Yeah, Get Hitched. Ben was our first guest.
Okay.
And Jonathan was our 20th. We kept him for episode 20 as a.
I just realized this was what you were printing.
Yes.
So not only were you printing, you were also cutting with the scissors. So you were very quick.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed.
We're very focused on our customer
yes,
service.
excellent customer experience.
Absolutely. Please leave a review at the door.
I will.
We've got a little tablet like you have
exactly.
at the bank.
Yes.
With a smiley face.
No, I like the stories of these types of companies, and really the sky's the limit. As you said, nowadays you can start a company and the potential is endless.
Yeah.
Even like Stripe, it was founded by two brothers in Ireland,
Yeah.
and now it's this giant organization. So
and the difference is they focus on customer. Like I know these guys from Bookia, and they work their ass off to make sure that the product that they have is on customers. And whenever I go to a restaurant, I kind of ask them about it, and everyone says like, I would never go back to not having Bookia.
Okay.
Like, it saves so much time. And I might this is not a paid ad, okay? But they do say like I've gained so much time because customers don't call through but use the service that it's already worth the offset of having to buy the software or rent it. But
the restaurants and
because the restaurants use it to book for clients to book through it, right? And it has like it saves you tables and all that, so it's a really good application, but it has been reverse engineered from what the customers needed. They did everything right.
That's what all the best companies do, as you said. And I remember during the pandemic, it was obviously a really scary time, and for a number of reasons. But for businesses, it was pretty terrifying, even just to try and survive. And a lot of our customers that were restaurants managed to survive from the deliveries, but it was really new at the time. But they had to adapt their model. But a lot of them managed to survive on this, and obviously the demand for deliveries skyrocketed because no one could go to the restaurants.
That's it, right?
So, but as you said, it has to be around what the customer needs. So it sounds like that's what they're doing.
No, absolutely. But listen, Scott, thank you for
thank you for having me, and I'm really proud of you with your podcast. That's why, of course, I had to say yes. And I've seen most of your episodes, and it's always great. Awesome. Yes, I have. That's thank you for having me on the show. It was an honor. Well,
if you've seen most of our episodes, you know that at the end of the episode we ask the guests to share their message to the world if they were on a world stage. So if you had to give one message, what would it be?
I have to wear my CX hat because I live and breathe customer experience. And it's just that a world that focuses on customer experience is a better world. And as you said earlier, we're not, performing heart surgery. But if every organization really focused on its customers at the heart of what it's doing, what a better world it would be for everybody. And life can be stressful and difficult enough. So it's the small things that can really make a big difference. So try to make that difference today for somebody. Even if you can't change the world for everybody, you can really make a difference and change one person's world. And you're never too small to make a difference or to contribute. Everybody has a role to play. So please, whatever you're doing, place your customers at the heart of it. I have to say this. And definitely you'll then see the benefit of doing that. So, of course, there's a reason that you should do it, but you'll definitely start to see the results of that.
Always love your enthusiasm and your energy, Scott. I missed that. I missed working with someone so enthusiastic, well-spoken and articulate. So
thank you.
Thank you for coming, mate. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
That's awesome.
The pleasure was all mine.